There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive through effort. It doesn't rise through willpower. And it doesn't need you to become anything more than you already are. It is the strength that remains when everything unnecessary falls away. If you've been feeling tired, not just physically, but inwardly, this moment is not asking you to push past that. It's asking you to stop measuring yourself by how much you can carry. Because quiet strength is not built by holding more. It's revealed when you stop bracing. You may have noticed this already. After everything settles, after the noise quiets, something stays. Not excitement, not certainty, but a steadiness that doesn't leave when nothing is happening. That steadiness is not weakness. It is not absence. It is not emptiness. It is presence without strain. Most people mistake strength for tension, for effort, for staying upright through force. But there is another kind, one that doesn't tighten when the world presses in, one that doesn't rush to respond, one that doesn't need to prove it exists. You don't have to summon this strength. You don't have to activate it, and you don't have to protect it. It has been here longer than your effort ever was. If you pause for a moment, not to listen, but simply to notice, you may feel it as a subtle weight in the center of you. Not heavy, not light, just grounded. This is not the strength that moves mountains. This is the strength that lets the mountain pass through you without resistance. And the more you stop reaching for it, the more clearly it remains. Nothing is being asked of you here. You are not being guided toward change. You are being invited to recognize what has quietly been holding you up all along. Stay here for a moment, not to become stronger, but to feel the strength that no longer needs effort. Strength does not deepen by climbing higher. It deepens by settling downward. Most of what feels exhausting is not life itself. It is the constant holding up, holding posture, holding composure, holding identity, holding together what no longer needs to be held. Quiet strength appears when the body no longer braces against gravity and the mind no longer braces against itself. You may feel this descent not as movement, but as permission. Permission for the shoulders to release without collapsing. Permission for the breath to arrive without being shaped. Permission for the center to drop slightly, not away, but into itself. Nothing is falling apart here. Nothing is being let go of abruptly. This is a descent into stability. Like a stone settling at the bottom of clear water, clarity does not come from effort. It comes from stillness being allowed to reach its natural depth. You don't need to search for this center. You don't need to visualize it. You don't need to understand it. If you pause long enough, the body remembers where balance lives. It is lower than thought, quieter than emotion, more solid than intention. This is where strength stops performing and begins existing. The descent is not dramatic. It may feel almost uneventful, and yet something subtle happens here. The constant inner leaning forward softens. The need to anticipate loosens its grip. The sense of "I must be ready" dissolves. What remains is not passivity. It is readiness without tension. You are not sinking. You are arriving. Arriving at the place that has been holding your weight the entire time, even when you forgot it was there. Let the descent complete itself. No effort, no correction, no improvement. Just the quiet recognition that strength does not rise, it settles. There is a quiet shift that happens once the descent is complete. Not a change you can point to, but a subtle rearrangement of inner space. This is the moment when the inner world stops feeling crowded. Thoughts may still pass through. Sensations may still rise and fall, but they no longer press in from all sides. Space appears not created, but revealed. You may notice that awareness feels wider now, less focused on doing, less narrowed around problems or plans. This is not dissociation, it is coherence. The inner realm organizes itself when it is no longer being managed. Nothing here needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be observed closely. Nothing needs to be named. Quiet strength grows best in conditions of non-interference. Like a room that settles after noise leaves it, your inner field naturally finds balance when left undisturbed. You don't need to guard this space. You don't need to protect it. It is stable because it is simple. At the center of this inner realm, there is no voice claiming authority, no image announcing power. There is just a steady presence, neutral, calm, unremarkable. And because it does not announce itself, it cannot be shaken. This is the difference between force and strength. Force demands attention. Strength does not. Force tightens to prove itself. Strength remains open and unmoved. In this inner setup, you are not preparing for action. You are preparing for clarity. Clarity that will move when movement is needed. Clarity that will remain still when stillness is required. Nothing is being rehearsed here. The inner realm is simply being given the conditions to be itself. And in that simplicity, a quiet confidence begins to form, not as a feeling, but as a baseline. You may notice it as steadiness behind the breath, or as a subtle weight at your center, or as a sense that nothing is missing. That is enough. No affirmation required, no conclusion drawn. The inner realm is now set. Expansion does not arrive as intensity, it arrives as capacity. Not more energy, but more room for what already exists. In this phase, nothing is being added. Nothing is being amplified. Nothing is being pushed outward. Instead, what was once compressed is allowed to spread naturally. You may notice this as a loosening behind the chest, a softening through the shoulders, a sense that the breath no longer has to travel far to be complete. This is not release in the dramatic sense. It is permission. Quiet strength expands when it is no longer contained by effort. The inner field begins to feel more evenly distributed, less centralized around thought, less anchored to reaction. Awareness spreads gently, not outward into the world, but evenly within. There is a subtle confidence here, but it does not feel personal. It is not your confidence. It is the confidence of something stable, being allowed to occupy its full space. You may notice that silence feels different now. Not empty, not heavy, but supportive, like a surface that can carry weight without strain. In this expanded state, emotions may still arise, but they do not pull the center with them. Thoughts may still appear, but they no longer define direction. Expansion does not scatter you. It integrates you. Everything that belongs is included. Everything unnecessary falls quiet on its own. There is no boundary you need to maintain here. The expansion knows its limits. It does not overflow. It does not dissipate. It simply fills what is available. This is why quiet strength feels calm even when it is wide. There is no urgency to move, no impulse to demonstrate. Strength that has expanded naturally does not seek confirmation. It rests. You may sense now that your presence feels fuller, not louder, not brighter, just more complete. This is the field you carry forward, not as an identity, not as a role, but as a condition. Quiet strength is not something you summon. It is something you inhabit. There is a moment when strength changes quality. Nothing new appears, yet everything feels clearer. This is the shift. Not a surge, not an awakening, not a realization you can point to, just a quiet reorientation toward what is already steady. In this shift, attention no longer moves outward to confirm itself. It rests closer to the center, not as focus, but as residence. You may feel this as a subtle illumination within experience, not light in the visual sense, not imagery, but a sense of inner clarity that doesn't depend on thought. This is not insight, it is coherence. The inner field becomes self-consistent, less fragmented, less pulled in different directions. Nothing is being aligned intentionally. Alignment happens because resistance has fallen away. Quiet strength does not sharpen here, it simplifies. What once felt complex begins to feel unnecessary. What once demanded explanation begins to feel complete without words. This is the nature of the Lumen shift. Clarity without commentary, presence without narration. The mind may still operate, but it no longer stands at the center of authority. Something quieter takes that role. Not command, not control, just steadiness. In this state, effort feels optional. Reaction feels delayed. Urgency loses its momentum. You may notice that your relationship to time softens. There is less anticipation of what comes next, less pressure to move forward, not because movement is wrong, but because movement will arise naturally when it is needed. Quiet strength does not hurry. It waits without tension. This shift is not meant to be held onto. It cannot be preserved by intention. It remains only when allowed. The more you stop trying to stay here, the more naturally it continues. This is not an elevated state. It is a grounded one. And from this grounding, clarity becomes reliable, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just quietly present. Integration is where quiet strength becomes livable, not as a practice, not as something you return to occasionally, but as a baseline that moves with you. Nothing changes on the outside yet. The world remains as it was. Your responsibilities remain. Your relationships remain. But the way strength is carried has shifted. It is no longer something you gather before entering life. It is something already present as life unfolds. Integration does not ask you to remember this state. It does not ask you to maintain it. It happens naturally when there is no inner resistance to experience. You may notice that situations feel less invasive, less personal, less demanding of immediate response. This is not detachment. It is containment. Strength integrates when it no longer leaks outward through reaction and no longer collapses inward through suppression. It stays where it belongs, at the center. From here, action does not feel urgent. Rest does not feel lazy. Silence does not feel empty. Everything has its place. You may sense that decision-making becomes quieter, not because options disappear, but because clarity arrives before conflict does. You don't need to prepare yourself to be steady. Steadiness is already present, and decisions simply move through it. Integration means you no longer switch between being centered and being active. There is just presence, expressing itself differently depending on what is needed. This is the difference between discipline and alignment. Discipline holds itself together through effort. Alignment holds itself together through coherence. Quiet strength integrates because nothing is being forced. It belongs everywhere it goes. You may feel this as a subtle confidence, not in outcome, but in your ability to remain intact regardless of outcome. Nothing here needs to be protected. Quiet strength is not fragile. It is stable because it is simple. Let this integration settle. No anchoring required. No conclusion drawn. Just the recognition that strength no longer needs a separate space to exist. It moves with you now. The return is gentle. There is no shift you need to mark, no moment where something ends and something else begins. You simply find yourself here, present, intact, and unhurried. Quiet strength does not stay behind. When attention moves back toward the world, it does not retreat. It does not fade. It remains because it was never separate from you. As awareness opens outward again, there may be a sense of continuity, as if nothing important was interrupted. Sounds may be noticed more clearly. Sensations may feel more grounded. Thoughts may resume without pulling you away. This is not a loss of depth. It is depth expressing itself quietly in motion. You do not need to carry anything forward from this space. You do not need to remember what it felt like. What matters is not memory, it is stability. Quiet strength is not something you revisit. It is something that stays while everything else moves. As you return, you may notice that the center feels less fragile, less dependent on conditions. Even if the day becomes busy, even if decisions arise, even if uncertainty appears, the steadiness does not need to respond. It simply remains. This is how quiet strength supports action without directing it. You will move when movement is required. You will pause when pausing is needed. No effort to manage either. The return does not close anything. It leaves the door open. And as you continue, know that nothing essential has been added and nothing essential has been taken away. Quiet strength is not a state you enter. It is what remains. When nothing is being held up by force, let the return complete itself in its own time. There is nowhere else to go. You are already here. Nothing needs to close. There is no moment you have to mark to know that this is complete. Quiet strength doesn't end when the words slow. It doesn't dissolve when attention shifts. It remains because it was never created by this space. As the sound of these words begins to fade, there is nothing you need to carry with you. No insight to remember, no feeling to preserve, no state to return to later. What matters has already settled, beneath effort and intention. If the mind moves again, let it move. If the body adjusts, let it adjust. Quiet strength does not depend on stillness to exist. It is present in motion, present in pause, present even when unnoticed. You don't have to stay here, and you don't have to leave. This space remains available without needing to be revisited. Let whatever comes next arrive naturally. Let the moment unfold at its own pace. Nothing is being asked of you. You are already supported by the steadiness that does not strain. And that is enough.